Okay, so we've been talking about building a customer's trust, and we talked about the customer satisfaction pyramid with the exceptional service experience at the base, followed by fixed right first time, and then trust on top of that. And we've talked about building relationships to get to the trust, using sales tools, multi-point inspections, etc. I want to talk now about something that I think is the far most overlooked aspect of any service department that I've ever seen, and that is appointment scheduling. Poor appointment scheduling creates more chaos for you, the technicians, and the customers than anything else. Proper appointment scheduling can make you more profitable and work more enjoyable and drive customer satisfaction through the roof. Here's why. What is your goal with appointment scheduling? Why do we schedule appointments to begin with? When I ask this to my seminar groups, oftentimes the answer that I get is, well, we want a convenient time for the customer to come visit us. Okay, sure. So when the customer calls me up and says, I need a brake inspection done, and I say, okay, Mr. Customer, what time would you like to bring it in? That's, taking care of the customer, right? It's giving them a convenient time. Is it helping me? Maybe a little bit, because I know when to expect the customer. Okay, so maybe I'm scheduling around what work I have coming in on my schedule. But there's a far more important aspect to all of this. Good scheduling accomplishes three things. First of all, it accomplishes maximizing your shop load, or maximizing your shop capacity. You see, if you don't have a car in that bay out there, you aren't making any money. That is productive square footage in your building. No car in the bay, no money being made. You want to maximize your shop capacity. That's your number one goal with scheduling. Your number two goal with scheduling is bay flow or workflow. It's trying to even out those highs and lows of the day. Really, really busy at 8 in the morning. Really slow at 10 in the morning. Really, really busy at noon. And so it goes throughout the day. And you get what I call the daily roller coaster, right? And we're all on the daily roller coaster. You're never going to get rid of the daily roller coaster completely, but the trick is to level out that roller coaster. Don't get the highs so high and the lows so low. Get it somewhere in between. Because technicians standing around with no cars in their bay at 10 a.m. and you're down here, that's not good for anybody. Customers backed up at your counter, technicians going crazy at 8, noon, or 6, that's not good for anybody either. Because how does that affect your customer? Well, there may be shoddy work getting done because everybody's in a hurry. You certainly will not have time at the counter to handle that customer properly. And it will actually lower your customer satisfaction. So if you can level out that daily roller coaster, you're going to increase customer satisfaction, you're going to smooth out your bay flow, and you will assure better shop loading. So how do you even out that daily roller coaster? That's the trick. Now, when the customer calls up and says, hey, I need a brake inspection done, and you say, well, what time's convenient for you, Mr. Customer, which is what you should do, the customer says 2 p.m. Great, we've got an opening at 2 p.m. So they come down at 2 p.m. What do you want? Do you want them to sit around and sit in the waiting area, waiting for the vehicle? Or would you rather get them on their way? This is especially important first thing in the morning at 8 a.m. when you got everybody on their way to work dropping their vehicles off. Encourage drop-offs. Have an express drop box outside your building. An early bird drop, express drop, night owl drop, whatever you want to call it. But an express drop box mounted to the outside of your building with a slot through the door, stocked with envelopes, stocked with pens and pencils. Make sure somebody checks on that every day. So the customers can fill out the envelope, put their keys in it, and drop it through the slot. Now some of you guys are thinking this. Oh yeah, we've got one of those, and the number of keys we get dropped without an envelope, or the envelopes that get dropped without keys, good Lord. Your point's well founded. I get it. Been there, done that. How do you address it? There's nothing you can do the first time it happens. But at the counter, I would keep a copy of that drop envelope so that when the customer came up to pay the invoice, you pull out that drop envelope, you stand there with the customer, and you fill it out with the customer or for the customer, explain to them what information you need, that the keys go in it, and hand them the envelope and say, here, stick this in your glove box, Mr. Customer, and use this envelope the next time you come in. This works really well if you're having a problem collecting that information. So use these tools to avoid waiting customers, because waiting customers will get you on that big roller coaster. If they're dropping their vehicle and they're gone out of the store, that roller coaster just got a little bit smaller. Another quick tool that you can use, go to a local rental car agency. Many OE dealerships are doing this now. Go to a local enterprise, Hertz, whoever you have in your neighborhood, and say, look, I would like to offer a rental deal to my customers so that they're not waiting in my waiting room while they're performing service work. What kind of a rate can you give me? There are rental agencies out there that are offering $10 a day to certain service department customers. $10 a day. Do you think if I walk in as a customer and you say, hey, I can put you in a rental car for $10 today, how's that sound to you? Instead of you waiting here. I'm probably going to go, yeah, my time's valuable. Let's go. For 10 bucks, let's do it. Go ask your local agencies. You'll be surprised at what they say. It's all about reducing the roller coaster. You can still give the customer convenient time, but you're trying to reduce the roller coaster. Now, let's talk briefly about shop loading, and then we'll circle back around to the roller coaster thing. How do you ensure maximum shop loading? Well, if you're using a paper schedule, that can be a challenge. And when I see shops using a paper schedule, I say to them, if I call you up and ask for an appointment, what are you looking for? And the answer is, well, white space. You know, if there's an opening on that schedule, I'm going to write your name in there. Okay, so what's to keep you from putting 60 oil changes down on that schedule on any given day versus 60 clutch jobs on any given day? Big difference, isn't there? 60 oil changes, not real profitable, not going to tie up base for very long, but 60 clutch jobs, very profitable, but going to overload your shop, won't they? So how do we handle this? Part of my job as an instructor is to give you information. It may not be something you can do now, but I'm going to tell you how it's done in the perfect world, and then you can decide how you want to do it. And the information I'm going to share with you is basically how the service management systems, the better ones, account for scheduling. And they use something called a time bucket. Now, we'll talk about technician efficiency in a little bit, and you're going to have to keep track of technician efficiency in order for this to work. You're going to measure your technician efficiency. And real quick, technician efficiency is number of hours they're physically in your shop versus number of hours that they bill. And you want 100% roughly. If I know that on any given week, the technicians I have in the shop can turn 100 hours for me, then that's my time bucket for the week. I have 100 hours of available time to sell my customers. Even if they're all here 40 hours, but they produce for me 100 hours in a week. That's what I have available to sell. That goes in my time bucket. Now, customer calls me up and says, hey, I need an oil change. I subtract, say, a half hour from the time bucket. Mr. Smith, minus a half hour. There's the oil change scheduled. Now I've got 99.5 hours to schedule. And this is what you're going to do for all your regular shop operations. You'll know roughly how much struts take, shocks take, tires take, alignments, etc. You create a list, you figure out what that average is, and you subtract that average amount of time for every service, for every appointment from your time bucket based on technician efficiency. Okay? So you've got a time bucket full of time you're subtracting from. Now, what screws this up? I'll tell you what screws it up. Upsells, carryovers, tow-ins, broken parts, poor diagnosis, right? The list goes on and on and on. So what do? I'm willing to bet that you can track your average weekly upsells, right? You may do it now. Or maybe you know it intuitively. Know what your average weekly upsells are. Say it's 20 hours. Say every week that we're in operation, we upsell about 20 hours worth of work. What do I do with the number? I subtract it from the time bucket before I even start scheduling. So my 100 hours of available time to sell, I subtract 20 out of that 100 for upsells, right off the top. Now I have 80 hours available to sell, assuming I'm going to upsell 20 from those 80. Well, what do you do for carryovers and tow-ins and all that? You know roughly, how much of that you see in a week. It's not about perfection. You'll never get it dialed in to where it's 100%. But you're trying to even out the roller coaster. You're trying to maximize your shop load, your shop capacity more often. So from that time bucket, subtract the upsells that you can't easily track. Subtract, the approximate, say we get about 4 hours a week of carryover work. Okay, so now we're down to 76 hours we have available to sell. You can do the same for tow-ins if you get a lot of those. And you can modify these numbers based on your experience as time goes on. Create them now, just start tracking them for the next month, and figure out a time bucket. So let's say we end up with 60 hours available every week to sell. What else is going to mess this up? Well, okay, here's the thing. How many people answer the phone in your shop? If you're lucky, it's one, but more than likely it's anybody that can be near a phone, right? So that relies on everybody answering the phone to subtract their amount of time that they scheduled from that time bucket. Yeah, ruh-roh, you know what happens. So how do you minimize the effect of me continually forgetting to subtract the time from the time bucket? And at the end of the week or by the middle of the week, we think we have 10 hours left to sell and we really are -5. How do you handle that? Well, here's one way of minimizing that. Say there's 3 of us that can answer the phone, 3 of us that can schedule appointments. You take your 60 hours of time in your time bucket and you divide it by 3. You give me 20 hours, you give him 20 hours, and you give her 20 hours. Every time we answer the phone, we subtract from our own 20-hour time bucket. That way, if I'm forgetting to subtract, I'm only affecting that 1/3. I'm not affecting the other 2/3. They're still selling from theirs. Now, what happens if they run out of theirs and I haven't sold anything from mine? Well, they come to me and say, hey, I need 5 hours of your time. I give them 5, I subtract 5 from my time bucket, and we trade time, essentially. Again, it's not 100%, but you're trying to minimize the roller coaster. You're trying to minimize your overall effect. So, 3 things that proper scheduling does: maximizes shop load for maximum profitability, evens out bay flow to help get off the roller coaster, and by doing so provides time to properly handle the customer. Make sense? More to come.